Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today,
Correct.
we are strapping in for a fascinating trip back to 19th century Britain
We are.
because we want to examine a question that is, well, it's absolutely relevant to everything happening right now in technology.
Mhm.
How does society react when genuinely disruptive, maybe even terrifying new technologies arrive? And how quickly does that fear get turned into destructive legislation?
That's the core tension we're diving into. Our sources today give us this remarkable window into that exact conflict, focusing on the intersection of innovation, raw fear, and, official control.
Right.
So our mission is to really analyze the history of the early automobile and this astonishingly restrictive law known as the Red Flag Act.
We need to understand not just what the law said, but the political and economic forces that made it happen.
And the severe, lasting industrial costs the UK paid for that delay.
This isn't just a history lesson, it's a blueprint for regulatory overreach. I promise you, when we unpack the details of this law, you will see a perfect metaphor for innovation just being crushed by caution.
So where do we begin?
Okay, let's unpack this. We're starting in the mid-19th century. What does the transportation world even look like in the UK before the car shows up?
It's highly established. You have to picture the scene. Horse-drawn carriages, they completely rule the local roads.
That's the functional, reliable way to get around town.
Exactly. And they support these massive ancillary industries, stables, blacksmiths, carriage manufacturers, and for long-haul travel.
The railways.
Britain is the undisputed champion thanks to the massive railway infrastructure they pioneered. The whole system is efficient, it's profitable, and it is very, very politically protected.
So you got this perfectly stable status quo, and it's backed by just enormous amounts of capital. And then here comes the disruption.
The self-propelled road vehicle, the
Yeah.
horseless carriage.
How was that initially perceived? I mean, it can't have been good.
Oh, it was very poor. It was seen as this dangerous machine. And to be fair, not without reason. These early prototypes were incredibly noisy, they belched smoke, and they were mechanically very unreliable.
And they're on the same roads as horses.
Right, and that's the immediate social impact. It's a recipe for chaos.
A carriage horse is trained for normal traffic, but then this metallic monster shows up, moving without being pulled. That's going to panic every animal in sight.
Absolutely. The noise, the steam, the smell, it just spooked the horses, which led to accidents. So the early perception of the automobile was deeply, aggressively negative. People saw a threat.
They saw chaos, danger to their kids, their livestock.
They didn't see progress. And this is where the deeper resistance comes in, because the concerns were never just emotional, they were fundamentally economic.
And highly organized.
Correct. You have two colossal industries that feel threatened. First, the entire established horse-drawn sector.
The coachmen, the stable owners, everyone whose livelihood depended on the horse.
And second, and this is crucial, the immensely powerful, heavily capitalized railway industry.
The railway barons. Their investments were enormous, all built on the idea that they owned long-distance travel.
Exactly. So any new, potentially decentralized transport network, like a road network, is a direct existential threat to their whole monopoly.
So this wasn't just a blacksmith fearing for his job. This was about protecting hundreds of millions in railway investments.
And the profits that fueled political influence. When we look at the history of the Red Flag Act, we're not just looking at regulation. It's a classic case of what we call regulatory capture.
Where the established players use safety concerns as a perfectly legal weapon to choke out the competition.
It gives the whole effort a veneer of public service when really it's just a financial defense.
And for the early innovators, unfortunately, real-world incidents provided the perfect political ammunition.
It really did. You have to talk about Richard Trevithick's London steam carriage.
This is from 1803, right? Decades before the act.
Yes, but the story became this cautionary tale that just stuck in the public imagination for generations.
A lot happened.
During a test run in London, the operators stopped the vehicle and left it unattended.
Left it unattended.
Reportedly to go into a pub for a meal. While they were gone, the fire in the boiler wasn't damped down properly, the steam pressure built up, and this heavy machine just rolled away on its own.
Oh, no.
It crashed through a fence and ended up setting fire to a shed.
So you have an unattended mechanical beast causing property damage and a massive fire.
Precisely. Now, no one was killed, but the headlines basically confirmed everyone's worst fears.
That these machines were unpredictable, they were volatile, and dangerous in untrained hands.
You combine that public anxiety with the relentless, organized lobbying from the transport sectors, and you create an environment where radical legislation becomes, well, it becomes inevitable.
Okay, so the pressure builds,
Right.
and when Parliament finally acts, they don't just tap the brakes.
No, they pull the emergency stop cord. This brings us to the regulation itself, the Locomotive Act of 1865.
Universally known as the Red Flag Act.
And this wasn't about managing technology. It was about ensuring its complete subordination, a legislative chokehold.
Absolutely intended to make commercial operation impossible.
Economically and practically impossible, yes. The sheer scale of the restrictions is fascinating. It ensured the technology could not advance beyond, literally, a walking pace.
Okay, let's start with the first hurdle. The crew. The three-person crew requirement.
Yes. For any self-propelled vehicle, no matter how small, you legally required a minimum crew of 3.
3 people.
You needed the driver, naturally. Then if it was steam-powered, you needed a stoker to tend the boiler.
Right, and then the third member, the person who made the whole thing instantly absurd.
The flagman.
The flagman.
He was the ultimate symbol of this fear-driven regulation. This person had to walk on foot at least 55 meters ahead of the vehicle.
55 meters, that's, what, half the length of a professional football pitch?
Roughly, yes. And that distance was critical. Their job was specifically to carry a bright red flag to warn other road users, especially horse riders, that this terrifying machine was coming.
And they had to signal the vehicle to stop if a horse got scared. Let's just step back and visualize this. You have a cutting-edge piece of engineering, but its maximum potential is limited by the stamina of a single person walking 55 meters in front of it.
It's an instant functional humiliation of the technology. And think about the economics for a second.
They're paying 3 full salaries.
A driver, a stoker, and the flagman. Just to move a small vehicle slower than a horse. It immediately makes the cost of labor prohibitive.
Which ensures that the traditional horse-drawn carriage with one driver remains the far more viable economic choice.
The law wasn't just about safety. It was economic sabotage under the guise of safety.
And the speed limits just confirm that intent.
Absolutely. The maximum allowable speed was set to a literal walking pace, 4 miles per hour in the countryside.
4. That is deliberately limiting the mechanical potential to less than what a horse could do.
And in towns and cities where the perceived danger was highest, the speed limit was a mere 2 miles per hour.
2 miles per hour. A pedestrian could easily outpace you.
It guaranteed it. So the most advanced land vehicle of the day was legally restricted to a slow stroll operated by 3 people and preceded by a herald carrying a banner of caution.
And to the people invested in horses and railways, this probably all seemed perfectly sensible.
Of course. It prioritized stability, traditional livelihoods, and absolute public safety over this untested, disruptive new thing. They were just protecting the known world.
But the known world was changing, whether Parliament liked it or not. And that brings us to the devastating consequences of all this caution.
As the technology inevitably improved, it got cleaner, quieter, faster. The absurdity of the Red Flag Act just became a national embarrassment.
And the legislation proved to be incredibly damaging on a national scale.
Massively. By making operation unfeasible, the act just completely stunted the development of a native British automotive industry for decades.
Which is so ironic. Britain was the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution. Steam power, the railway. They should have been the natural leaders here.
They absolutely should have. But you have to contrast Britain's regulatory environment with its neighbors in Europe.
Where innovation was allowed to grow.
With far lighter restrictions, yes. So countries like France and Germany, the homes of Carl Benz and Gottlieb Daimler, they gained a massive, decisive, multi-decade head start in automotive technology.
So while British engineers were trying to find 3 guys willing to walk 55 meters ahead of their machine,
German engineers were busy building viable, mass-market internal combustion engines. This regulatory lag caused a major shift in industrial power.
the UK lost its early lead in what would become one of the 20th century's defining industries.
All because its government was focused on managing perceived fear rather than fostering technological growth.
The frustration must have just built and built until finally, 31 years after the act was passed.
Action.
The repeal finally happened in 1896, and it was a major social and political event. Early motorists celebrated it with what they called the Emancipation Run.
A drive from London to Brighton to celebrate their freedom.
Exactly. So what were the big liberating changes?
Well, first and most symbolically, they completely abolished the flagman requirement. The man with the red flag was gone.
Free at last.
And second, the speed limit was dramatically raised to 14 miles per hour.
14. After being stuck at 2 miles per hour in cities, that must have felt like breaking the sound barrier.
It was liberating. It finally allowed the technology to be economically and functionally viable for the first time in Britain.
But the industrial damage had been done.
The damage was done. When Britain finally entered the race, it was already chasing continental Europe.
So let's pivot and pull out the deep dive lesson here. This story is so compelling because the anxieties from the 1860s, fear of noise, accidents, job loss.
They're exactly the same anxieties we feel today about AI or autonomous vehicles or bioengineering. The core tension is identical.
It's that conflict between embracing innovation and managing perceived risks.
And this history shows us that the reaction to fear can be immediate and severe. It leads to regulation that isn't designed to manage a technology, but to preserve the existing social order.
If your only tool is based on the system you're trying to replace, legislating that the machine must operate at the speed of a pedestrian, then you are actively suppressing the benefits of that new technology.
The Red Flag Act just highlights how overly restrictive, fear-driven regulation, even when it's rooted in genuine safety concerns, ultimately pushes progress into the arms of your competitors.
The progress of the motor car was inevitable.
It was. The UK just made sure that innovation happened somewhere else.
The story of the flagman, a literal person walking ahead of the machine. It's the perfect encapsulation of a society allowing fear to blind it to the future. I mean, it's hard to imagine a more potent symbol of regulation designed to protect the past.
It truly is. So let's leave you with this final provocative thought building on this history. Today, autonomous vehicles are routinely restricted to specific areas or safety speeds, not because the tech is incapable, but because the regulatory environment is still catching up.
Right.
So when we look at emerging fields like fully autonomous driving or gene editing, how should societies measure the intent of regulation? How do we distinguish between necessary cautionary rules, like, creating standardized driving laws and regulation that will later be seen as just fearfully hindering inevitable progress?
Like the Red Flag Act.
Oh.
And maybe the most important factor is the one they missed in 1865. Timing.
The timing.
Too early with a restrictive law, and you kill the industry before it can even start. Too late, and you might have missed your shot at industrial leadership entirely.
That's food for thought for every regulator today.
It is indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.